Good afternoon, everyone. It is Monday, March 10th at 3:10 p.m. and we're here for a meeting of the CDA Selection Committee. Jackie, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Committee Member Kyung,
Present.
Committee Member Ingracia,
Present.
Committee Member Rhodes,
Present.
Committee Member Alexander,
Present.
and Committee Chair Pfeffer.
Present.
Okay, you have a quorum, you're good.
Thank you very much. With that, let's move to the first item on our agenda, approval of the minutes for the Selection Committee held on January 15th, 2025. Kevin emailed those minutes around on Friday. Does anyone have any questions or comments on those minutes?
I guess the only thing is, was he able to add what time the meeting adjourned? There was a
Yeah,
highlighted.
I didn't realize he wasn't here today, and I just realized today when I saw them that he hadn't plugged that in.
I mean, I'd be fine just to approve the minutes and
amend it.
amend it with the time when Kevin returns.
Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds good.
What time did we adjourn? Does anyone recall so that we can?
I don't recall. That's what I was asking.
Okay.
I move that we approve the minutes from the Wednesday, January 15th Selection Committee, pending the inclusion of the time the meeting adjourned. Second.
The motion has been made and properly seconded. Jackie, could you please call the roll?
Committee Member Kyung,
Aye.
Committee Member Ingracia,
Aye.
Committee Member Rhodes,
Aye.
Committee Member Alexander,
Aye.
Committee Chair Pfeffer.
Aye.
It's approved.
Thank you. With that, we move on to the next and primary agenda item, which is review of requests for proposals / qualification and responses on three procurements on the three procurements that were approved on January 15th, 2025. And for clarification, what we'll be doing today is discussing the responses, and then we'll be holding the formal approval votes on Wednesday when we reconvene, and that's because we need everyone to sign disclosure forms and get those over to our office before we take any votes in accordance with Ordinance 64102. But with that, we're going to be talking about three procurements. The first is the Slurf Closeout Services RFP. And so on that one, as you'll recall, this is a $150,000 procurement, which we are soliciting, and we solicited proposals to provide closeout services to assist both CDA but also the city's emergency management agency in closing out the city's American Rescue Plan Act funds, the state and local fiscal recovery funds. We actually only got a single response to this procurement. It was from Major 360. And we convened with staff, actually with SEMA, to review this and discuss the merits of the application. Staff was ultimately, both at SEMA and CDA, were satisfied with Major 360's capacity to do this work, and does recommend approval and authorization to enter into a contract. But I want to just open up discussion for any questions or comments that folks may have about the proposal. And I do want to start by inviting Rashonda Alexander, our Director of Compliance, to share any additional comments regarding this proposal.
Yeah, the only note that we discussed was their rate seemed to be their rate was the same across every month. So we made an edit with them to give us billable hours based on the service that they provided. So when we contract with them, it is specifically detailed exactly how many hours and for what purpose they'll be billing. Other than that, SEMA and CDA didn't have any issue with their capacity and like the fact that there was a local component.
I had a question about that too. And the only other thing I would note is I was curious what the comptroller's office thoughts were because it looked like they had some experience doing work for the city comptroller in the past.
That's a good point. We did not reach out to the comptroller's office for that comment, but I don't know if Larry, that's something that you can offer any insight on or that you can perhaps inquire of before we reconvene on Wednesday.
I can probably check into it to see how far we've worked with them in the past. At current, I do not have that information.
My other question is kind of similar to Christine's is, did you all check the references from the previous entities they worked with?
I don't believe we have. We did check the references for the next project that we're going to discuss, where we had multiple applicants and we were pretty torn between them and wanted to get that additional flavor and context for their work. But in this one, seeing as there was only one option, really our decision and the decision for this committee to help us make is, are we satisfied with the qualifications of this applicant, or do we want to extend the period and extend the solicitation? I'll also note that one of our partners, Haggerty, who responded to our initial bid, essentially indicated that they felt that the scope of services that we were requesting required additional funding than the $150,000 that was available. And so that's something that we could explore as well, although we would need to identify where those funds might be available. But I do think that when we discussed it with SEMA, we agreed that that the firm seemed to have the capacity to undertake this work, but I do think that in the before we begin the contracting process, and certainly before Wednesday, we can go ahead and call those references. Rashonda, is there anything you'd add?
No.
I guess a question for the committee is, to what extent, and I pose this question to SEMA as well, to what extent would we prefer to extend the solicitation versus to support to move forward with Major 360? And again, we don't need to take a vote today. We'll do some reference checks and hear from the comptroller's office about their experience. But SEMA's reaction to that was that they would prefer to move forward with contracting, and as opposed to extending the solicitation further.
I think if you get positive feedback on references, if you're able to check those before Wednesday and from the comptroller's office, I'd be comfortable moving forward.
Let's see
Helpful.
what information we can come back with.
Thank you, Larry. Especially because the budget, I believe, is restrictive based on our responses and our relationship with Haggerty. We knew that they would respond, but the budget limitation is present. So
And
thank you
that
for the
budget-
consideration.
And that budget limitation, for context for everyone, is based on a subrecipient agreement between CDA and SEMA for $150,000. So it is pretty set in stone unless SEMA or the mayor's office can identify some other source of funds. But from CDA's perspective, there's no additional funding available. All right. Any further discussion before we move on to watershed management, flood mitigation, and green infrastructure planning services? Great. On this, we had 3 responses from Interborough Partners, Greenprint Partners, and CIS. After reviewing the responses with an interdepartmental group, including the planning department, LRA, Green City Coalition. And that's because our whole work around green infrastructure involves a lot of diverse stakeholders. LRA owns so much of the property. The planning department has been leading land use planning work. And so it's fundamentally interdepartmental. We drafted the RFP with their input. And so we've been reviewing these responses with their input. The clear consensus was that two of the responses were head and shoulders above the third, that CIS and Greenprint Partners were head and shoulders above Interborough in terms of their experience. Interborough has done wonderful work with the city. In fact, they led the city's strategic land use plan. But in terms of specific concrete experience on green infrastructure, Greenprint and CIS, this is what they do. This is the heart of their practice. Whereas with Interborough, it's an element of their practice, if that makes sense. And so there was consensus around from the planning department, from CDA and others about Greenprint Partners and CIS being our top two. We did schedule interviews with them and called through references. And we've learned a lot about green infrastructure through that process. And ultimately, the recommendations very close and welcome some discussion because they both have a lot of capacity. These are two very good choices for us as far as we're concerned. We think that both would do an excellent job, but that in particular, St. Louis, as I think I've said before, we have a really fraught relationship with our river, and we have a really unique hydrology due to being at the confluence and of the Mississippi and the Missouri with the chain of rocks, with a unique topography and geology. We have a very fast water table as well. Water moves very, very quickly through St. Louis because we have so many impermeable surfaces. And therefore, one of the elements that we feel is most important is it needs to be community driven, but data informed. And we felt, and the group, and in particular, the environmental experts at PDA felt that CIS brings a little bit more technical capacity to bear on some of these questions. We did have some concerns, again, speaking frankly and transparently about part of I think the discussion has been, it would be amazing if we could blend different elements of both, right? I think that's often the case, and we want to do that. And CIS is, and by the way, each of the teams, CIS comes with Geosyntec and SWT, all of which have really great capacity. But frankly, we thought that in terms of community engagement, the reverse was true. And the team that was with Greenprint, which includes Vector Communications, was the stronger option. And so ultimately, we sent over some questions, including to CIS, whether they would consider expanding kind of their community engagement team. And they have responded that they would, in fact. And so the recommendation from our team is to authorize us to move forward with contracting with CIS, subject to kind of expanding the community engagement piece of their team, but want to open it up for discussion and answer any questions.
That increased community engagement, is that going to add to the original price tag that they've quoted the city?
No, we're going to stick with 500,000 and work through that in contractual negotiations, what the specific breakdown of all those costs are.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I'm glad you stated all of that information, because when I looked at the proposals, whatnot, that's where I was headed. I just wanted to make sure, you know, that I was in the correct mindset.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. And something else I'll note that I forgot to mention, but we did call through references. Both had pretty glowing references, but in particular, the scale and scope of the work that CIS has done, they're just frankly a somewhat larger company that has a broader practice. They are the largest green infrastructure kind of engineering and production company in the United States, and in particular, a conversation that we had with Prince George County, where they've been doing about $400 million in green infrastructure development over the last few years was really impressive, because what they were explaining is that in Prince George, they've been really able to provide the line that staggered me is that they have been able to manage CIS with just a handful of staff to do $400 million worth of work. And when you have a partner that can provide that kind of capacity across the board in planning, engagement, and implementation, I think that's the kind of partner that we're looking for, given our limited capacity in this area. And what brings us, I think makes the interdepartmental team very interested in CIS as a partner is just that capacity.
I absolutely concur. This morning when he said that they had been doing this not for a few years, it was 10 years. And he was the sole project manager, and he also had one engineer. And then the engagement that they had across the universities to build capacity with students to take them into the pipeline was very impressive as well. So their community engagement with the universities was attractive, and I hope that they'll be able to do something similar in St. Louis to help build us out as well. You're on mute, Christina.
I think she's talking to someone else.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I guess, Noel, I appreciate all your comments. Those were gonna be relatively a lot of my questions, so you've already addressed it. I know we're talking about the watershed management RFP, but green infrastructure and design, looking at these proposals, I kind of looked at them as complementary of whatever we choose here is gonna impact the other and vice versa.
Mhm.
And so, I guess, not that this is an apples to apples comparison of the team structures, but for green infrastructure design, really what I'm getting at is I was leaning towards geosyntech, but geosyntech and obviously CIS overlap in teams, and I wanted a balanced approach. So then I was looking at Greenprint because I thought they had a better and stronger community engagement arm. So I'm open to CIS being the best here, but my direct question is the CIS team, in your opinion, in the interviews you all did, are they more mindset that they would be stronger in watershed management, and then maybe a firm like Greenprint is actually stronger in the infrastructure design? I couldn't, based on the proposals, tell where their strengths truly were, other than they had really strong proposals in both buckets.
Yeah, I'll make a couple of comments. And first of all, to the interaction, for context, what our recommendation is going to be when we get to the RFQ is that we authorize all four as qualified. Because that's the fact of the matter, is that all four are qualified, and then we can invite them to respond as we identify specific sites that we want to develop as green infrastructure. So hopefully that's helpful. But going back to your question about CIS and their capacity, again, it was the Prince George example that really has left a mark in how I think about it, because I think that what they're hoping to do here in St. Louis is really take this as a planning opportunity to develop a very large green infrastructure plan. And that's the reality that everyone here knows, is that St. Louis has pretty extraordinary green infrastructure needs in order to become resilient to flooding moving forward. We have so much water. It's actually an incredible blessing and resource to us to be at this confluence and have so much water, but it also presents enormous challenges, and we do need pretty large multi-$100 million style investments. And I think that that's what CIS is interested in, is helping us develop the plan, not only for what do these investments look like, but also how do we fund them, and then being a partner in helping us implement them. So I think that they are being strategic. They have not worked in St. Louis previously, but I think that they see a need for green infrastructure. And so that they're going to be good partners in helping us develop that plan. And then they may also be great partners in helping us implement it. But frankly, this green infrastructure that we're funding on the design and implementation side, that's going to be $9.8 million worth of green infrastructure, which is pretty modest in comparison. And that's where I think these other firms will do a wonderful job in helping design these specific green infrastructure interventions, of course, in dialogue with the planning process. But I don't think, basically what I'm saying is that I don't think that this $9.8 million of green infrastructure investment that we're doing through CDB GDR is going to be the end of the road. And I think that the planning process that the CIS will lead will help us kind of build that road out and that path out further. Does that help answer your question?
Yes and no. It sounds like there's a lot of strengths that overlap here, and it's choosing the best team for both, responding to both RFP.
Well, the difference is that the first one is a planning process and the second is an implementation process. And we do think that all 4 of the respondents for the implementation are qualified.
No, I had a quick question. It did give me pause in both CIS and Greenprint, that to your point of us being uniquely situated at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, neither of those applications mentioned the rivers at all, or the fact that because of just all of the things you mentioned, create a unique problem for us to solve. There's no place else in the United States that has to deal with anything similar. So I guess I'm just curious if you had those conversations in interviews, or if maybe Geosyntec is able to bring some of that expertise, since they have projects all over the world and may have encountered similar situations in a built, like a natural environment.
Yeah, one of the questions that we posed in the interviews was specifically about the rivers and any river restoration projects that they had been engaged in or that they could point to as comparable. And both had pretty compelling responses. I'm not remembering the details of them, frankly. And I don't know if Rashonda can remind me of so to be more specific, Greenprint, we asked the question, they provided a compelling response I can't recall. On the other hand, with CIS and Geosyntec, we actually ran out of time in our interview, and we followed up with that question in writing, the same exact question, and they provided a response that I can read from here, where they pointed to the Des Plaines River restoration in Illinois, the Kishwaukee River restoration also in Illinois, and noted that they had worked on variety of projects, including river and wetland restoration projects.
Okay. I think that's probably a decent but not a great answer. I mean, just working in development proposal projects along the river since I've been working at City Hall, a lot of developers or organizations like this think they understand, but many, many times they don't. So I would just, if you move forward with them, I think they're impressive for a lot of other reasons. I would just really caution you to make sure that what they're proposing actually makes sense in this particular unique location in the country.
Totally, and that's something that also brings me back to the conversation we had with the Prince George area, because Rashonda mentioned how how he mentioned that CIS had brought in a lot of universities and students, but he also mentioned that they had brought in university professors as kind of local experts on the hydrology because hydrology is so place-based and unique. And so I think that as they start this process, that would probably be where they would start as well, is by engaging with local experts and really trying to get a deep understanding of our hydrology.
That's great. Thank you.
Any further discussion on watershed management? Hearing none, let's move on to the next item, which is a discussion of the RFQ responses for green infrastructure design and construction management services. And here, as I mentioned earlier, we got 4 excellent responses from the Lamar Johnson Collaborative, Greenprint Partners, Arbolope Studio, and Geosyntec. We were impressed with all of these. CDA has actually worked with Greenprint Partners in the past on MSD green infrastructure project. along the 14th Street corridor. So we know firsthand the excellent work that they do in green infrastructure design. And we also are familiar with excellent work that Arbolope, Geosyntec, and Lamar Johnson Collaborative have done in this space. So we recommend that all four be authorized as qualified. And then we will move forward, and essentially, as we have individual sites which need green infrastructure design services, we will send those out to all four of them for them to bid and tell us what it'll cost for them to produce these design drawings and design a green infrastructure intervention for this site. But with that, I'll open the floor for any comments or discussion or questions.
I,
Sorry.
oh, go
Christina.
ahead, Shonda. No, go right ahead.
So I wanted to lift up Greenprint Partners in this space because of their work with MSD, and they have a more practical approach and great working relationship with MSD. So I look forward to well, I'd selected them in general for their RFQ, but with working in the storm water task force with MSD, I think it's very important that we choose a partner that can leverage that relationship. And they do. And they did also in the Choice neighborhood footprint with us as well, and continue to in the next project we have coming up at Murphy Park.
Well, with that being said, and plus we've already touched base with the watershed issues and the team, the synergy that already exists between Geosyntec and CIS. But now, Rashawn, I'm like, I think it may be up for some of you guys to enlighten us where you feel we need to go, because up front, I was thinking Geosyntec because of that team synergy that is already there. And now you're saying, Greenprint works very well prior with the city and MFD, and we'd like to build on that relationship. So right now I could choose either one of the two of all four, but it just sounds like it might be, you tell us.
Yeah.
It depends on the project. So like Lamar Johnson, very innovative, very creative. So it will depend on the project, I guess is the short, direct answer. And that's why we would like to qualify them all.
Okay.
Yeah, and to clarify also the relationship between these two efforts, the watershed planning work will lift up and basically produce as a deliverable the long-term needs for green infrastructure, which again could number hundreds of millions of dollars, right? We already have identified as part of our flood response work and the disaster recovery action plan, over half a dozen sites with the planning department that need green infrastructure today, right? And so what we'll do is we'll walk and chew gum at the same time. We'll do the long-term planning with CIS and also start assigning these sites to these different partners. And again, because we have over half a dozen, every one of these four may wind up being assigned a project, right? And as Rashonda pointed out, which project is the best fit for each one will be driven by their response, right? In terms of cost, how much it'll cost them to design, and also which project needs something that might be a little bit more kind of engineering heavy and technical, and that's a space in which Geosyntec has expertise around the world with, versus something that may need something that's more open to the community, creative and engaging, and that's a place where the Lamar Johnson Collaborative and others, not just Lamar, Arbolope and others have expertise. And honestly, we are spoiled for choice here. All four of these groups do excellent work, and hopefully we'll have a chance to work with all of them.
Okay.
I have two questions, Noel. I'm very open to the possibility of selecting all four and then you guys doing bids for and seeing who responds with the best concept and ideas. With that though, I guess I'm gonna ask both of these questions at the same time. One of them is, in your interviews and discussions with the four different teams, do we know their staff capacity if these teams are going to stay in contact throughout the course of it? Or are they gonna have to take other projects? Because now they're not being guaranteed that they're gonna get to work on all of it. So then realistically, is that an option between all the teams? And then my second question is, this might be just me not fully understanding it, but do we have a baseline of like plans? I'm using very simple example, or like a baseline of what we want the construction to look like so that there's some uniformity across the city, and it's not that this team decide these native plants are the best and this sort of water mitigation strategy, while a team might do something very different, and then we look like we have a lot of different things going on at the same time. That doesn't look like a cohesive approach across the city.
Yeah, I'll tackle the first one first, I think. Or at least I wanted to. Can you remind me what your first question was? Because then I was thinking about the second one.
First question is the 4 different teams, will they stay a team
Yeah.
if they're not being guaranteed a certain amount of work?
And I think the answer is that each of these 4 do this green infrastructure work, not only in St. Louis, but across the country. And so they responded with their qualifications, right? And they are all qualified to do this work. I think that they all have the capacity to take on an additional project when we send it over, and their capacity will also be reflected in those responses. So I don't think that what we're expecting is that all 4 of them are going to dedicate staff to St. Louis on an ongoing basis. That's really the RFP, that's CIS and Geosyntec and SWT who will do that. But on this side, it's really going to be project based, where we send around a project and they'll bid on it if they have that capacity. And again, that's how we've been moving forward with Greenprint thus far. And it's been a effective and good working relationship. And I guess the response would be if they don't have capacity, they won't bid. But frankly, all 4 of them have significant capacity. Now, can you remind me of your second question?
This is my just knowledge gap. Is there like a baseline everyone works from? So it looks like there's a
Oh, yeah.
cohesive approach on how we address green infrastructure across the city, or would everyone be coming in with their individual ideas?
So first of all, that's one of the things that kind of design standards is one of the things that we want to produce with the citywide plan. And so today there's not, although I think that we should definitely discuss with MSD what they've learned from their program. I think they probably have some design standards as part of their program, though I don't think we necessarily want to copy and paste those either, because we have an opportunity to produce green infrastructure that is also responsive to community needs. And that's fundamentally how we're thinking about this from a community development perspective, is that green infrastructure serves at least 2 functions. And one of those is absorbing stormwater, but another is beautifying and helping revitalize the neighborhood. As to whether there will be a lot of different types of projects, I think the short answer is yes, in that there's different types of solutions for different types of neighborhoods. One thing that we asked CIS and Greenprint was what kinds of projects they thought might be a good fit for St. Louis, and what kinds of green infrastructure they would encourage us to look at. Greenprint gave a really lovely answer about rain barrels being a kind of low cost, high bang for your buck type of green infrastructure that also helps get residents engaged. And I think that we would want to go through a planning process before that can be the kind of thing that comes out of a planning process. But there are a lot of different types of green infrastructure, from kind of bump outs and rain gardens to permeable pavement to obviously trees and are just some of the best and original green infrastructure. And in particular, through the Green Infrastructure Accelerator, one of the things that has come out is that bald cypress is a particularly good fit for rainwater and stormwater absorption here in St. Louis. That's natural to St. Louis, and that we probably need to be planting a lot more of. And so, in short, there will be a wide range of green infrastructure that we may develop. But the one thing that is key is that we at CDA are committed to engaging with the community to ensure that it is green infrastructure which is additive to the community, as opposed to something that we have on occasion seen where it's very fenced off and doesn't feel integrated into the fabric of the neighborhood.
I had just a quick question for clarification. Is the project that Lamar Johnson mentioned in their response the plan that the city adopted, the North Riverfront Open Space and Redevelopment Plan, or is that something different?
Could you direct us to where in the response you're looking at, what page of
I
the
don't have it open. Let me see. It was like their list of references.
Is it the Tower Grove Park project?
No, it's the North Riverfront Open
Mm.
Space and Redevelopment Plan.
Yeah, this is a pretty old plan, if I'm not mistaken. That I think I don't believe it was ever implemented. First of
No, it
all,
definitely, yeah, wasn't implemented, but the city did adopt one like in 2015 or 2016, but I don't think Lamar Johnson was involved unless they were called something else. So I was,
that's a good question to ask the planning department and Don, because I know that he was really involved in that North Riverfront plan, and we can ask what involvement Lamar Johnson Collaborative had in it.
okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. So if you could get some additional information, that'd be great. And just a personal pet peeve of mine, whenever anybody makes the Mississippi River blue, it makes me cranky on their plans.
It's a muddy river.
It is not the ocean. I don't have anything else, Noel.
Alrighty. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, scheduling next meetings. And actually, before we do, just one more reminder, if you could please send over your conflict of interest disclosure forms tomorrow to our office. We'll need, Jackie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll need 3 separate ones from each individual. Is that correct?
Can you send us those over to send to you?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
And we'll send 1 copy, but please print out 3 and fill out 1 for each of the 3 procurements. And then the next item on our agenda is scheduling our next meeting. And so I'm going to propose Wednesday at 10 a.m. Does that work for folks?
Yes.
I'm seeing nodding.
Works for
Yes.
me. And I'm
Great.
sorry, when I just commented, did I comment? Did you all hear me?
No,
No, you were on mute.
I'm so sorry. I just noticed that.
Go ahead, Jackie.
No, I was just saying what you said was fine.
Okay, great. Um, and so it sounds like we are scheduling the next committee hearing, or not hearing, the next selection committee meeting for 10 a.m. on Wednesday, March 12th. Kevin will send out an invite if he's back in the office tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll do it myself or
I just sent a hold for
Oh,
everyone and I'll
yeah.
start getting the Zoom and everything else scheduled.
Thank you so much, Tommy.
Uh-huh.
And with that, we are moving on to our final item on our agenda, adjournment. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Jackie, could you please call the roll?
Oh, we don't need to call the roll. All in
Oh.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everyone.